Yep, I'm just going to see if this... no, it doesn't do anything.
Hi, my name is Tracy and this is my adoption story. Oh. My name is Tracy Singer. I am 60 years old and I was adopted in Auckland, New Zealand. I was adopted out as a baby. I would have spent probably about 10 days in North Shore Hospital prior to them coming to pick me up.
I've come to meet Tracy, someone who has lived her whole life here in Auckland, the same city where her story first began. For Tracy, the beginning of her story came with only small pieces, a few details about her birth mother, and a lifetime of questions that followed.
So from what I understand, my birth mother had been living in Hamilton prior to my birth, had moved up to Auckland. Yeah, there was information that came out later in life when I was talking to my adopted mother, and apparently the doctor that had put me up for adoption, he was a friend of my mother as she had worked in nursing. And he also was the doctor that apparently assisted when the Harbour Bridge was being built and there was an accident on the Harbour Bridge.
For Tracy, the details of her adoption were never clearly explained. They were just always there, quietly present in the background of her childhood.
I can't remember an exact time when I first recollect, our family talking about adoption. I had a brother who was 6 years older, and so maybe the conversation was mentioned, and maybe my sibling said to me, "Oh, you're adopted," or something like that, but I just knew from an early age that I was adopted. I didn't feel like I fit with that family, but they were my family.
Even with all the unknowns around her beginnings, life for Tracy carried on like any other kid growing up in Auckland. She was raised in the suburb of Kohimarama, a close-knit seaside community in Auckland where the streets, the neighbours and the beach became her world.
So my earliest memories of my childhood home were the street that I lived in, the people in my neighbourhood. We lived on a shared driveway and there were a lot of children a similar age to me. It was lovely, it was carefree and we had a lot of fun. The area of Auckland hadn't been turned into much of a suburb, so there were fields and bush and the sea was within walking distance. So yeah, I had quite an idyllic childhood.
Life at home felt steady and familiar. Her parents worked hard, building a life together in Auckland, the place they would raise Tracy and call home.
My adopted parents both worked. My father had worked for civil aviation. He had started his job way back in the days when government departments were post office and places like that. So he started kind of like an apprenticeship, and he came from the South Island, and there was a role for him at Music Point, and he moved up here to work. And my adopted mother had come from Whangarei, and she had gone into nursing, so she was working at Green Lane, and so their early days for them were in Bucklands Beach.
As Tracy grew older, life at home began to feel different. Behind those happy memories, there were moments that were much harder to talk about.
My life growing up in my adopted family was not easy. I was the youngest child, so there was 12 years apart from me and the daughter that they had, a biological daughter, and 6 years between her and my adopted brother, and then 6 years between my brother and me. Yeah, with both my parents working, they relied on my brother and my sister to care for me when they weren't home.
As Tracy grew into her teenage years, the dynamics at home began to change. She started to push back, but it didn't always go down well.
I became quite rebellious and wanted to share my opinion, but wasn't old enough and always felt too young and even not acknowledged a lot of the time. because, yeah, the family was just so busy. Yeah, so...
Through these years, adoption was rarely talked about. It was always there, just never said out loud.
Yeah, my adopted parents didn't really discuss adoption as such. They kind of tiptoed around it, and they never really questioned that we were adopted. They just accepted, and they were very stoic about showing emotion, so yeah, it wasn't really talked about.
It wasn't until her 20s that Tracy started to look for answers, opening the door to parts of her story she'd never known.
I was 24. They opened up my file and told me the information that I needed to. So from there I started looking into how I could find my biological mother, who was shown on my report on child for adoption. So that's when I started looking for Mavis, my biological mother.
With Tracy having her daughter in 1992, this was one spark that led her to wanting to find her birth mother. But behind this was also worry.
There was a huge amount of fear around it. I didn't want to, intrude on the life that my birth mother and birth father had, only to have it thrown back at me and to feel rejection, because those feelings of rejection and abandonment were still, they were still quite on the surface and quite terrifying. I got really excited about it. There was suggestion that I should write to her, so I compiled a letter and sent it off to her, and she wrote back and said she wasn't my birth mother, which was devastating. I was really hurt. I sensed that she was probably lying, because there was no way. It was on the report, and rocks your world and changes everything, and it did change for me. She came back to me and fully admitted it, and then wrote me again and said, no, I'm sorry, and told me a little bit of background about herself, and yeah, we made plans to finally meet.
After years of wondering, Tracy finally had the chance to meet her birth mother Mavis, travelling to Australia to see her for the first time.
So I flew over to Sydney, and she met me at the airport, and I went back and stayed with her, and we went out for the day to the Blue Mountains, and we spent time up there with her, with my sister, her partner, my birth mother, and her best friend. And for some reason she didn't stay. She ended up leaving and catching the train back to Penrith, and we were left up there for the day and got chatting and found out that this is kind of the behaviour of my birth mother. If she doesn't feel comfortable in a situation, she will run away, basically. And then I went back to stay with her that night, and I left the following morning, and not on good terms, unfortunately, and that was the first and the last time that I ever saw her. And she passed away about 2 years ago now.
That meeting with her birth mother closed one door, but it also opened space for new questions. Tracy still wanted to understand the other half of her story, and that search began with a few small clues about her birth father. And when I met with Tracy to look through what she still had, the pieces were small, some photos and a note on the back of one. Little details that hinted at who her birth father might have been.
When I went to visit my birth mother, she gave me pictures of her with my birth father. They were in Hamilton at the time at an event, and she wrote on the back of it, "The boys from Kingsford." Yeah, he was really hard to track down, actually. It was not an easy, avenue to go along to find him.
Tracing her birth father turned into a long process. There were no direct answers, just more leads and more questions. So Tracy kept going, and that search eventually led her toward DNA testing and the people who would help her piece the rest together. So this is where the pieces really started coming together for you.
I mean, it's a jigsaw at the end of the day, and
It is.
Yeah, the pieces started coming together. The DNA was able to be split between the maternal and paternal, and when that happened, I located a niece that was really close to me in centimorgans, which are the DNA strands, and she wouldn't. She didn't reply to me for about 6 months. It was so frustrating. Every time, I messaged her, I never got a reply, but eventually she did, and then I was able to narrow it down that my birth father was her grandfather. So that was really cool.
It was a lot to take in, but learning who her birth father was and finding those DNA connections to his side of the family gave Tracy a clearer sense of where she belonged. For the first time, she could see how her story fit together. And with that understanding, Tracy was able to connect with her birth father.
It helped immensely with my identity, and it still continues today, because I am a lot like my birth father. We have a lot of things in common. Yeah, he's in his 80s now, and he's slowly losing his memory, which is really sad. But I appreciate the time that we are getting to spend together, because I talk to him each week. Yeah. So yeah, it was good to put the pieces together. Yeah, find out about this side of my family, which I'm going to continue to find out about when I go and visit his sister in a couple of weeks. So, yeah.
Soon after Tracy told me her story, she travelled to Australia. She visited relatives connected to her birth father's side, and she also returned to places linked to her birth mother's family. These moments for Tracy are reminders of just how far her search had taken her, and how much she had come to understand about where she comes from.
Touching down in Sydney was amazing, because the plane kind of circled the whole of Sydney, and I got to see it from the air, and it just, I haven't been in Sydney in over 25 years, so it was, yeah.
What did you find out in Queanbeyan?
It was just lovely being in this little town and seeing how quaint it was, and knowing that my birth mother was born there. Yeah.
It felt good.
Oh, it felt incredible, yeah. I'm glad that I went there, and I would like to go back one day. And it did answer some questions, but there were so many of them, that there's just a lot more unanswered questions, There's just family everywhere. It's just nice to know where you came from, and it has given me an awareness of who I am today, which is wonderful. Yeah, because, years ago when I was desperately, wanting to seek out these people, I had no idea what I was in for, and now it's just like, so that, it connects the dots. It really puts the pieces together and makes me understand who I am more, yeah.
Amazing, Tracy. Thank you for sharing with us.
No worries.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Tracy's story has helped her understand where she comes from and who she is today. And through her work as an artist, she has found a place to reflect, to create, and to be present with what she now knows. And through connecting with others who are also adopted, that understanding continues to grow.
Thank you for taking the time to watch Tracy's story as part of my An Adoption Story series. This series exists so that others adopted can share their experiences in their own words, and so these stories can be seen, heard, and understood. And if this story resonated with you and you'd like to support the series, you can do so through my Patreon or right here on YouTube as a member. Thank you all so much for watching Tracy's story right here as part of my series, with more to come for 2026. What's been the most exciting part of building a family tree now?
Oh, separating the DNA and finding out who's on my paternal side and who's on my maternal side, yeah.
How important do you think it is for a lot of us who are adopted to want to do a DNA test or build a family tree?
I think it's imperative that we do, even if it doesn't bring up a lot, because what you do now in the future and for future generations may be of some use. Yeah, it's about making connection and embracing, you know, the family history and
Awesome. Amazing. Thank you, Tracy.